Welcome everybody, and we're starting off a bit unusual this time. We're starting with showing you the final results because there's a lot of backstory I wanted to get out before we get into the actual painting project. First of all, I want to thank architectsofwar.com for sending me these Saga Skraelings for me to paint and for you to watch. So be sure to check them out for all your historical miniature needs. And onto the project itself. What are Skraelings? Skraelings are the Norse word for the indigenous tribes they met in North America and Greenland. Essentially what we today would call Native American or Eskimo. Now, painting these guys, I try to do some historical reference to them, but some I just had to piece together, mainly because the tribes that the Norse met, as far as I know, have all been wiped out. They were wiped out centuries ago by diseases they brought over. So I try to piece together different native cultures and try to paint these things. So this is not 100% accurate, I will admit that. One thing I wanted to mention mainly is the skin tone. There is a wide variety of skin tones for Native Americans. They were literally from coast to coast, from north to south, and just like most cultures, they didn't all look exactly the same. Plains Indians without any cover would have been a deeper red skin tone color, and those more forest Indians or living up higher in the north would likely have a more pale skin tone. So that's what I used going into this project. These guys are supposed to be in the upper northern Canada area, so I painted them slightly more pale. I just want to point that out in case some people were saying, oh, they're not red enough or something. I definitely wanted to stay away from the F-troop looking Indians with like bright red skin, because I just don't think that would have been realistic looking. But I could point out some adjustments you can make in the paint scheme if you want to do something more like that for your own Native Americans. And finally, the jewelry and some of the war paint. The war paint essentially is made up because trying to find actual realistic historical war paint is quite difficult because Native American culture has been so diluted, essentially. Go search on Google for Native American war paint, and finding actual historical pictures of Native Americans with war paint, not what you find. You find drunk college kids painting up their faces, and you find the Redskin baseball team and stuff like that. So that's made up. Also, the jewelry I had to kind of invent because I didn't know exactly what was available to this culture at that time. But so there you go. Anyway, let's get on to the actual project itself, and we'll give a bit more description as it goes on. So let's start at the beginning. The main focus on this project is, of course, the skin, and the figure was primered, and then I airbrushed undercoat of burnt umber over that to fill in any spots, and because brown shades everything, and this is going to be a quick project, so an undercoat of brown works very well. But for the skin, we're starting with a heavy dry brush, of our Panzer Ace Shadows Flesh color, which is has a good amount of red in it, so that's a good start for our Native Americans here. And that gets followed up with a slightly lighter dry brush. It's a mix of Panzer Ace's Yellowish Rust mixed with a little bit of flat brown. Now the Yellowish Rust is close to a flesh tone, not as pink as my regular flesh tone that I use, and I really liked it. It had some brown in it, and also I mixed a small amount of flat brown into it because I could have mixed the shadow flesh, but that was coming out too red, and again, I didn't want to make these guys super red, so a little bit of flat brown darkened it without turning it red. If you want more red Indians, you can just use the shadow flesh color if you wish. Once that's done, we start applying straight yellowish rust in a standard layering method with a brush. Since this is a speed project, the paint is not as thin as I would normally do it for a much more display-worthy project. So this is mainly being covered up in 1 or 2 coats of thin paint rather than using 5 or 6 or 7 for each coat. Next comes a mix of Yellowish Rust and Sunny Skintone, Vallejo model color Sunny Skintone, and it's about a 50-50 mix. Again, this paint is not very very thin as I normally would do it, partly because it is a speed project, but something else is because we're going to be putting a very heavy glaze over this afterwards, a glaze slash wash, and that's really going to darken everything up, and it's really going to hide the stark contrast between the colors. So it's a fast way to paint, but you also have to really over contrast, because you'll see later how this overall wash will really darken everything and bring all the colors into the same uniform tone. So over highlighting is a real key to doing this speed technique. For the final highlight, I added a good amount of highlight, Panzer Ace's Highlight Flesh, which is my standard highlight color, into that previous mix. And again, you can see now how much contrast, far more contrast than I normally add on a miniature, how much a contrast stands out. And this color is just going on, as usual, just the tips, you know, the top of the shoulders, the bridge of the nose, the cheeks, eyebrows, and knuckles mainly. It looks really extreme now, but once we do the wash in the next stage, it will really tone everything down, and it'll all come together. Last thing to do is to give the entire figure a fairly heavy coat wash, which is a mix of Vallejo flesh and brown inks. About a 50-50 mix of each. And putting a wash at the end, especially in speed project, really helps, because it really smooths out all the rough-looking texture on a figure. If you, for example, dry brush the entire figure, put a wash over it at the end, and it'll really soften the harsh look of all that rough dry brushing. And you can see now all those really bright colors that I just quickly painted onto the skin have somewhat disappeared, and the whole thing is toned down. And so the flesh is done. Now we're moving on to the pants. Their pants would all been made out of animal hides, I guess rawhide, or I hear it called leather, but of course they didn't have the same tanning process that Europeans did at the time. But it should be fairly light in color. I'm using, starting off with a mix of Vallejo model color green ochre and English uniform. You could definitely go a much brighter color if you wish. I could definitely see doing something like a yellow ochre mixed in with some buff or some beige. Might be a bit more realistic, but this worked for me. And once that's dry, we go on to straight Vallejo model color green ochre. Again, just leaving that previous color in the recesses. The pants are then highlighted twice by adding more and more beige each time. And again, a lot of contrast. It's a quick project. So paint's not very thin, but it will get blended in once we get to the wash stage. However, it's a bit harder to highlight the pants than the skin, because the pants are just much more rounded and they're just straight legged, so there's less areas to highlight. So a lot of this highlighting didn't actually come out at the end, but you'll see that. And finally, we end up with a wash of Vallejo Sepia Ink. And I failed to mention on the previous wash that both of these are mixed with a little bit of Pledge with Future Shine from the the video previously to this one. And the Pledge just helps with tide marks. If you're just slapping ink on, you really don't know how to use the ink, mix a little Pledge with Future Shine in with it, and it makes the ink slightly easier to use. But with that, the pants are done. You can see the highlights kind of disappeared, but let's move on. With the skin and the pants out of the way, that's pretty much 80% of the figure, so most of the extra work is just detail work. Armbands and various ropey string areas I painted with beige, and Realistically, probably these would be the same color as the pants. However, I did want some variety in the miniature, and I think it is quite realistic to say that the hides of different animals, you know, the drawing process using those, you might get a slightly different color from them, so I don't think it's too unrealistic. Also at this stage, I'm painting any of the animal tails and also the feathers that are all over these figures. Later I'm going to go back and repaint them with white before starting the actual painting process to them, but since I have the color on my palette now, and one coat of white is better than two, might as well do it now while you have the paint out. After a white base coat, the feathers just got some lines, essentially, in various shades of brown. I basically just used whatever brown I currently had wet on my palette and just went with it. Something like this with feathers, or, you know, especially painting some areas, you don't always have to use the exact same color every time, and that's just another speed technique. Oh, I have some green ochre on my palette from painting something else, or some dark brown, so just use that and just go with it, and it works fine, and it helps speed up the project and save yourself some paint. And then once these are painted, I just went over them with some sepia ink to finish them off. The fur was painted somewhat in the same method as the feathers, and I do apologize for straying off camera here, but the fur is just done over a white base coat with just a series of washes of whatever colors I had on my palette at the time. However, I did try to do an overall light wash, say a light brown wash, and then a medium brown wash, and then a darker brown wash, working towards the top upper portion of the fur, or tails as I referred to them when I was painting these to myself. But it's a quick way to paint the fur. It's not super great, but it's done. And I did mix it up with it, starting with some using light gray instead of white, and in some I even painted brown and used more black washes on them. But it was quick and effective, and they're done. And now I'm starting to make some historical assumptions. I really needed some color on the miniature, and it's not quite unreasonable to assume they had some sort of beadwork ability, either stone beads or wood beads. So I just added small dots along the armbands of various colors, and also they are wearing earrings, and some have necklaces that I painted in a bright color as well. Possibly they could have been gold or some precious metals. We know some tribes had some crude gold-making abilities. But I just went with the idea of it's painted stone or painted wood or something like that. And the same process with the war paint as well. I just kind of historically guessed each tribe had their own style of war paint. But trying to find historical accuracy with war paint is nigh impossible, especially with a tribe like this that's been wiped out of existence centuries ago. But for the war paint, I stuck with black gray, Vallejo model colored gory red, and white. And using just those three colors gives a uniform look to the entire war band. And and the designs I just kind of made up roughly. Found some photos, but if you go searching on Google for war paint, you'll see you find much more photos of drunk college girls and people at Redskin games than you do actual historical Indians with the war paint. But just add some simple designs. Since this is the chief here, I went a bit more elaborate, covering the whole face. And another benefit of putting on the war paint is you can cover up any mistakes you made previously. And but there we go, it is all done. And the last thing to do is a quick wash of brown ink basically this is a cleanup stage, redefining any areas, shading the areas around the armbands, the bone work that I did on the chest, and any other areas that just need a little bit of extra shade and definition. But with that, this project is finished. And here we are, back to where we begun. I got a fully painted Skraeling Saga force ready to go. And the main points in this project I want to point out is that the washes, mainly that you can use a wash once you're done painting an area rather than like base coating and using a wash. Using a wash in after painting the whole area really tones everything down. It helps to hide any rough areas that you painted. If you're looking to paint something like this really fast, you can just dry brush everything and then put a wash over at the end to help hide that dry brushing. You just have to remember you have to go really extreme on the contrast, because if you use that heavy wash to hide the rough texture, it's really going to darken your highlights as well. So you may have to play around a little bit to figure out exactly what are going to be the right the right amount of contrast to use depending on your project, but it definitely does speed things up. And I painted 40 of these guys in a little over a week, and I can finally move on to something else. So there you have it. Thanks for watching. Once again, I want to thank architectsofwar.com for sending these to me, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.